Hello, everybody. It's Joe, aka Nerdfist, and this news really freaking sucks. If you haven't heard, and I'm sure everybody has heard by now, it's been all over the news the last few days. Uh, David Bowie passed away, and for whatever reason, this news like kind of hit me a lot harder than I thought it would because I've never really considered myself to be a huge David Bowie fan. I've always been a David Bowie fan. I have almost all of his records, some of them on vinyl. Uh, I have, and it wasn't really something I thought about until he passed away. That you know, I have so much of his music on iTunes, and and he had just released his most recent album. Just I guess it was, just a week or two before he died, and all those new videos of his were coming out. And I was like, God, this dude is, almost 70, and he's still like producing better music than like, almost anybody out there. I mean, musical tastes vary, but David Bowie seemed to be somebody who kind of transcended rather, musical tastes. Everybody I knew or know that kind of likes different types of music, either rap or ska or death metal. All of them seem to have a soft spot for David Bowie, and it was something I hadn't really thought about until he died. That here's a dude that just kind of transcended age and gender, and because a lot of girls, and I don't mean this to sound sexist, but there's a lot of girls, and I guess it's just a lot of the girls that are in my area, but they all seem to be into one specific kind of genre of music. And that's probably just because I'm in the South. I'm sure if I was to go to New York, whatever, it would probably be different. But every girl I talk to, it's always Taylor Swift and Lady Gaga and stuff like that, and that type of music just doesn't really interest me at all, and it seems very boring. But I understand why people like it, and I guess it was over Thanksgiving. I remember asking one of my cousin's daughters. She's about 8 or 9. I said, what are your bands? What are you into? And she said something, and I'd never heard of it. And I was like, what kind of music is that? And she was like, oh, it's country. And I said, yeah, you like country music? She was like, yeah, it's my favorite. And I started rattling off like names of stuff, like because she's into playing music, like she plays violin, and she's like really good. And so I started naming all these, different, stuff that I thought she would like. I was like, have you ever heard of the Runaways? Or, have you heard of, Pat Benatar and, David Bowie and all the, I was rattling off name after name, and she had never heard of them. And I looked over at my cousin and I said, what the hell are you teaching this girl? And I was like, what parent doesn't like introduce their child to stuff like that, or different movie, different music genres? And I understand letting your child get involved in whatever they like, but at the same time, I think the point of being a parent is to kind of introduce your children to things they may not be aware of. And David Bowie was kind of one of those things for me, and I wasn't introduced to it by a parent. I was introduced to it by a friend of my parent. uh this is going back well over a decade. But when I was around the age of 8 or 9, we moved to this large house out kind of in the country, just 10 miles away from kind of the hustle and bustle of the city. But really, the city to me was was kind of the suburbs. But about 30 minutes outside of Atlanta, in this huge house It had like 7 bedrooms, a pool. I mean, it was a mansion. It was technically a mansion, and we couldn't afford it. But my stepfather was like, "Oh, we can afford it, and we're gonna make all this money and blah blah blah." He was one of those type of people, and we didn't live there long. Probably only about 8 months before we got kicked out, and we're technically homeless for a little while. But while we were living there, the whole upstairs of the house was basically another house, and my mom rented rented out part of that upstairs to a friend of hers who was a hairdresser, and this woman cut my hair from the time I was like 3 years old to I guess the last time she cut my hair I was probably in my early 20s, but she moved in and she had a huge movie collection, or to me seemed like a huge movie collection. It was probably only maybe 100 movies, but to me it was massive. And she had them all labeled, and she had like this index. She was a total movie nerd, but she had this index of all the movies, and she moved in, with this huge collection of movies. And the first thing she did was start introducing me to movies that she liked and thought that I would like. And one of the first, maybe the first movie she showed me was Labyrinth, and it blew me away. It, for a kid that age, around, 8 or 9, I might have been a little bit older than that, but when you see a kid's reaction to watching Labyrinth for the first time, it's a mix of wonder and horror, and that is something that they don't really do a whole lot, anymore when it comes to kids movies. The era of stuff like The Goonies and Monster Squad and stuff like that is very much a very 80s centric thing. But it was the first time I had ever seen David Bowie, and I remember hearing that first song. I kind of forget the title of it. I think it's just called Underground, but it's right at the beginning of of the movie, and it's the character is running back to the her house, and it's raining, and that song kind of sets up the whole concept for the rest of the movie, or is kind of like a precursor to the tone of the movie. And then later there's Magic Dance, which is like one of the most iconic musical numbers in any movie ever. I mean, I can't think of a more iconic musical number than maybe something like Singing in the Rain, or maybe something from like My Fair Lady, or Oklahoma or something like that. I mean, or the Sound of Music. I mean, it's that iconic. And this was it was the first time I knew who David Bowie was, and I didn't know who he was. I just assumed he was an actor, and I can remember. I guess it was that summer for my birthday. It was right around that time when gift cards started becoming really popular, and I got a gift card to. It wasn't Best Buy. It was something like Walmart or something, and I remember going and buying a David Bowie CD. It was like one of the first, CDs that I kind of bought with my own money, and I guess it was that Christmas, Walkman's, CD, or Discmans, just kind of become popular, and I got one for Christmas, and it was really the first time, in my whole life where I had the freedom to kind of listen to what I wanted to listen to, and so I had a little bit of disposable income, and I was buying, the music that I felt I wanted to listen to. And it's one of the most freeing things as a young person, when you finally have that little bit of freedom to, like, okay, I'm going to like this, and I don't care what my parents think. I'm going to like it anyway. But, I had, cool parents that encouraged it, and I was allowed to listen to pretty much anything for the most part. They weren't real happy, when I got older and liked, stuff like Korn and Marilyn Manson and Limp Bizkit. And this is the late, 90s, early 2000s. It's going back away when these, bands were still very, very popular. But when you think about it, Marilyn Manson, we wouldn't have Marilyn Manson if it wasn't for people like David Bowie, because David Bowie came along at a time when men were men and women were women, and a woman's place was in the kitchen, and a man's place was, working on the car and getting up early in the morning and going to work and, being the breadwinner. And David Bowie comes along, and it's just like, I'm going to wear makeup and I'm going to wear, these fancy shoes and outfits, and I'm going to be theatrical, and I don't, I give zero, zero fucks about what you think. And it was such a, I can't imagine what it was like being alive in the late 60s, and early 70s, or, more the early 70s when, Ziggy Stardust and stuff like that came out, and seeing the reaction on people. It had to, there's no there's no mystery to why David Bowie has been around for as long as he has, and it's really sad that he's gone. But when you look at that final album and you look at those last few videos that he put out, especially, the very last one, Lazarus, it's so clear, now looking back on it, that this this artist knew he was dying, and instead of, kind of going out, I think a lot of artists, they kind of go out sometimes maybe not happy with their last work, or, they never got the opportunity to do their last work, because they didn't know their time was coming, or, they were just, taken in an accident, or, whatever the reason is. Not a lot of artists get that chance to, say, here's my last statement. I'm going out the way I want, and goodbye, farewell. Here's my last message to you. I love you, and, you know, I'm gone. And that's such a sweet thing to do. And the video came out, just, 2 days before he died. And, like, I remember seeing that video in a feed on Facebook. And this is before I knew that he had died. And I watched it and I was like, that is freaking amazing. That is an awesome video. And then scrolling down, seeing R.I.P. David Bowie, and just that hit in the gut. Oh, it's so sad. It's so sad because the people like this are just going away. It seems like every day you see something about somebody like this going away, and it doesn't seem that there's any new artists filling the gap, because I think a lot of these newer people, they kind of have a shelf life. They're only here for a little bit of time. I don't know if, people like Jennifer Lawrence, or, Lady Gaga and stuff like that, are still going to be doing what they're doing a few decades from now. I don't know if the interest in those types of people are going to be there, because I don't know. I just feel like that kind of time has passed. People have such a short attention span that, people like David Bowie, the death of David Bowie may be, the end of an era. I mean, and when we start losing people like Ozzy Osbourne, and, the Rolling Stones and stuff, it's truly going to be an end of an era. But I don't know. I just thought I would share my thoughts about David Bowie. A huge, huge inspiration to me, even though I didn't really realize it until, he had passed. God, it's just so sad. Like, fuck cancer. Cancer freaking sucks. And it's something I've, been dealing with a lot lately, because I've kind of been going through my own, kind of cancer struggle. I don't have cancer, but, I have sat down with a doctor and heard those words, we think it could be cancer. Let's get you checked out. And that is freaking terrifying, because so many people I know have died of cancer. My father, my grandfather, my grandmother. And it's one of those things that, it seems like it's either cancer or old age that kind of takes people out. And if it wasn't for cancer, who knows how much more of David Bowie we could have had. So, anyway, thanks for listening, those who listened, and I think I'm going to go put on I think I'm going to go put on my David Bowie records. So, goodbye everybody. I love you, and I'll see you on the next show.